Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the mist-draped highlands of ancient Colombia, where the air is cool and the sky always seems to be holding its breath. You're standing at the edge of a lush plateau, dew gathering on your skin as the first rays of dawn catch on something glinting in the grass. It's gold, raw, unpolished, and so bright it almost hurts your eyes. You squint, wondering if you've stumbled into a dream or just the world's most inconvenient scavenger hunt. The ground is soft beneath your feet, the kind of earth that promises secrets and maybe a few stubbed toes if you're not careful. You probably won't survive this if you try to eat the gold, but hey, at least you'll look fabulous doing it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Bonus points if you're somewhere even sleepier than here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, brushing aside tall grasses, feeling the cool Andean breeze on your face. The Muisca, the people who called this place home, are already up and about. Their lives revolve around the land. Mountains that rise like ancient sentinels, rivers that snake through valleys, and of course, the gold that hides in the earth like a secret too good to keep. You watch as a group of Muisca villagers huddle around a small fire, their laughter echoing in the thin air. They're passing around a nugget of gold, marveling at its weight and shine, as if it's both a gift and a puzzle. It's easy to forget, lying here in the soft dark, that gold wasn't always about money or power. For the Muisca, it's something closer to magic, a way to speak to the gods, to honor ancestors, to mark the turning of seasons. Historians still argue whether the Muisca were the first in the Andes to work gold, or if they picked up the craft from neighbors with sheenier tools and even shinier egos. Either way, you can almost hear the debates echoing through time, like a distant podcast you can't quite turn off. You kneel down, sifting through the soil with your fingers. The gold here isn't just lying around in bars or coins. It's dust, flakes, tiny nuggets that catch the light just so. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll find a vein of it running through a rock, like a golden river frozen in stone. The Muisca don't mind gold the way you might imagine. No pickaxes, no dynamite, no hard hats with little lights on top. Instead, they coax it gently from the earth, as if asking permission rather than demanding riches. There's a quiet reverence in the way they handle gold. It's not just a material, it's a bridge between worlds. You watch as an elder traces patterns in the dirt, explaining to a wide-eyed child how gold is the sweat of the sun, a gift that must be treated with respect. The child nods solemnly, then promptly tries to eat a gold flake. You stifle a laugh, some things never change. A mainstream historical fact floats through your sleepy brain. The Muisca were among the most skilled gold workers in pre-Columbian South America, rivaled only by the likes of the Inca and the Chima. Their techniques would eventually inspire legends that sent entire armies marching into the jungle. But for now, the world is quiet, and the only thing on anyone's mind is breakfast. But here's a quirky tidbit for you: some Muisca believed that gold could actually sing. When hammered thin enough, a gold sheet would catch the wind and vibrate, creating a faint, eerie hum. Imagine lying in your hammock half asleep and hearing the hills literally sing you a lullaby. Not creepy at all, right? Just another day in paradise. You wander further, past fields of maize and potatoes, past salt pits gleaming white in the morning sun. The Muisca are masters of their environment, coaxing life from the highland soil and salt from ancient lakes. Gold is just one of many treasures here, but it's the one that will change everything. Historians still argue over how much gold the Muisca actually had. Some say their stores were modest, more symbolic than extravagant. Others insist there were mountains of the stuff, just waiting for a greedy conquistador to trip over. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. A shimmer in the fog, a story half remembered. You pause, letting the cool air fill your lungs. The world feels ancient and new all at once, as if time itself is taking a nap. Somewhere nearby, a bird calls out, its song echoing through the valley. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash over you, and for a moment, you almost believe you can hear the gold singing too. But don't get too comfortable. There's a lot more ground to cover, and you haven't even met the Goldsmiths yet. They're waiting in the next village, hammers in hand, ready to turn dreams into reality. Just watch your step. The last thing you want is to trip over a sacred offering and end up the punchline of a Muisca joke. You shuffle along a winding path, the kind that's just muddy enough to threaten your dignity with every step. The air grows warmer as you descend toward a river valley, where the sound of water burbling over rocks is almost hypnotic. You pause, watching a group of Muisca villagers crouched along the bank, their hands busy in the current. They're not skipping stones or washing laundry. They're after something far more elusive. Gold dust, the kind that hides in the folds of river mud and glimmers only when the sun hits it just right. You wade in, careful not to slip and stage an accidental slapstick routine for the local wildlife. The Muisca have a system, baskets woven from reeds, patient hands, and a rhythm that's almost musical. Scoop, swirl, sift, repeat. It's the original ASMR minus the fancy microphones. You try your hand at it, and after a few minutes, you're rewarded with a few sparkling flecks. Not exactly enough to retire on, but hey, it's a start. Mainstream fact time. The Muisca relied primarily on alluvial gold, painstakingly collected from rivers and streams. Unlike the Inca, who dug deep into mountains, the Muisca coaxed their gold from the Earth's surface, letting nature do most of the heavy lifting. It's a process that requires patience, a keen eye, and, let's be honest, a tolerance for soggy feet. But here's your quirky tidbit. Some Muisca gold seekers believed that certain river spirits guarded the richest deposits. To appease them, they'd toss in little offerings, flowers, beads, or even a pinch of ground maize. If the river liked you, maybe you'd find a nugget. If not, well, you'd just get wet. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuine acts of faith, or just a clever way for elders to keep the best gold spots to themselves. You can almost imagine a wizened old Muisca grinning as he sends you upriver to find the magic rock, knowing full well you'll come back empty-handed and a little bit humbler. You watch as children join the adults, their laughter mingling with the sound of water. They're learning the art early, fingers nimble as they sift through sand for the tiniest glimmer. Sometimes, a lucky kid finds a pebble big enough to show off, and suddenly everyone's crowding around, debating whether it's gold or just a shiny bit of quartz. Spoiler, it's usually quartz, but nobody wants to spoil the fun. You move downstream where the river widens and slows. Here, the mud is thick and sticky, clinging to your ankles like a needy puppy. The Muisca know this is where gold likes to settle, heavy and stubborn, refusing to drift too far. They scoop up the mud, let it settle in shallow pans, and watch as the lighter sand washes away, leaving behind a few precious flecks. It's a game of patience, and sometimes the river wins. Historians still debate just how much gold was actually pulled from these waters. Some argue that the Muisca's methods were too gentle to yield large quantities, while others point to the sheer number of gold artifacts found in the region as proof that, given enough time, even the laziest river can be coaxed into giving up its secrets. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. Rivers that were generous some years, stingy in others, and always just mysterious enough to keep people coming back. You take a break, sitting on a sun-warmed rock, watching as a dragonfly skims the surface of the water. The river is alive with movement. Fish darting, birds swooping, and somewhere beneath it all, the slow, secret drift of gold dust settling into the mud. You wonder how many centuries it took for the Muisca to map these currents, to learn where the richest deposits hid, and when the river was most likely to give up its treasures. A quick joke floats through your mind. If you ever feel like your job is pointless, just remember the Muisca spent entire afternoons sifting mud for a few flakes of gold, and yet, somehow, they made it look like the height of sophistication. You wander further, watching as the villagers gather their finds into small leather pouches. These aren't just for show. Each flake, each nugget, is destined for the hands of a goldsmith who will turn river mud into objects of wonder. But for now, the work is slow, methodical, and strangely calming. You find yourself lulled by the rhythm, the gentle slap of water against stone, the soft murmur of voices drifting on the breeze. Historians still argue about the environmental impact of all this gold gathering. Some say the Muisca were careful stewards of their rivers, never taking more than the earth could give. Others point to evidence of eroded banks and altered courses, suggesting that even the gentlest touch can leave a mark over centuries. You look around, trying to spot any scars, but all you see is green, gold, and the endless dance of water and light. As the sun climbs higher, the villagers pack up their baskets and head back toward the village, their pouches a little heavier, their spirits light. You follow, feet squelching in the mud, already dreaming of what wonders the Goldsmiths will create with today's haul. Maybe a tunjo, maybe a necklace, maybe something so strange it'll keep historians arguing for another 100 years. But that's a story for another bend in the river. For now, you let the sound of water guide you home, gold dust sparkling on your fingertips, and the promise of more mysteries waiting just around the next corner. You follow the villagers' muddy footprints away from the river, the gold dust still clinging to your hands like a secret you're not quite ready to share. The path winds upward, cutting through fields of maize and potato, until you crest a ridge and see the world of the Muisca spread out before you. Patchwork fields, clusters of thatched huts, and, in the distance, a shimmering lake that seems to pull the sky down to earth. The village is alive with the clatter of daily life. Children chase each other between houses, women tend to fires, and old men sit in circles, swapping stories that are probably half true and half invented on the spot. You wander through the bustle, drawn by the smell of roasting maize and the faint tang of salt in the air. Salt, you quickly learn, is the real treasure here. White gold scraped from the beds of ancient lakes and traded for everything from feathers to obsidian knives. The Muisca are salt people first, gold people second, and you can almost taste the pride in every grain. Mainstream fact: the Muisca civilization flourished on the high Andean plateau known as the Altiplano Cundiboyacense, a region rich in salt deposits and fertile soil. Their control of salt production made them powerful traders, connecting distant valleys and jungles with a network of exchange that stretched for hundreds of miles. Gold was special, but salt was survival. You stroll past the salt pits, shallow pools lined with clay, where brine evaporates under the sun, leaving behind crusts of pure white. Workers scrape the salt into baskets, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. A few pause to wave at you, their faces creased with smiles and the faintest dusting of salt. You try a pinch, half expecting it to taste like legend, but it's just salty. Go figure. But here's your quirky tidbit. Muisca salt makers sometimes wore elaborate hats made of woven reeds, not just to keep the sun off, but to show off their status. The bigger the hat, the more important you were. Historians still argue whether these hats were purely practical or if they doubled as an early form of social media. Like, my hat, and I'll trade you some salt. You drift toward the lake, its surface glassy and still, reflecting clouds that seem close enough to touch. This is no ordinary body of water. It's sacred, a place where the boundary between world and spirit blurs. The Muisca believe the lakes are portals, gateways to the realm of the ancestors and the gods. Offerings are made here, flowers, food, and, most famously, gold. You kneel at the shore, feeling the cool water lap at your fingers, and wonder what secrets lie beneath the surface. Historians still debate the true significance of these lakes. Some say they were sites of regular ritual, with offerings made to ensure good harvests and safe journeys. Others argue they were reserved for the most important ceremonies, moments when the entire community gathered to witness the Zipa, the Muisca chief, make an offering that would echo through legend. The truth, as always, is probably a bit of both, shimmering just out of reach like the reflection of the sky on water. You watch as a procession approaches the lake, led by a figure draped in gold and feathers. The Zipa, resplendent and solemn, carries a small bowl filled with gold dust. He pauses at the water's edge, murmurs a prayer, and scatters the dust across the surface. The gold floats for a moment, catching the sunlight in 1,000 tiny sparks, before sinking slowly into the depths. The crowd watches in silence, breath held, as if waiting for a sign from the gods. You hold your own breath, just in case. A child tugs at your sleeve, pointing to a spot where the water ripples. That's where the lake spirits live, she whispers, eyes wide. You nod, not quite sure if she's joking or if you should start worrying about your shoes. Either way, you make a mental note to keep your feet dry and your offerings humble. The sun dips lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The village quiets, the day's work done, and you find yourself drawn back to the lake, watching as the last rays of light dance on the water. Somewhere out there, beneath the surface, lies a fortune in gold. offerings made over centuries, each one a prayer, a wish, or maybe just a really expensive way to impress the neighbors. Historians still argue about how much gold actually ended up in these lakes. Some claim the stories are exaggerated, that the real treasure was always the community and the rituals. Others point to the occasional discovery of gold artifacts dredged from the mud as proof that the legends hold more than a grain of truth. You shrug, deciding that a little mystery is good for the soul and for bedtime stories. As night falls, you settle by the water's edge, the air cool and still, the stars reflected in the lake like scattered coins. You close your eyes, listening to the gentle lapping of the waves, and let yourself drift, the boundary between dream and history blurring just a little more with each breath. You wake to the soft clatter of tools and the low hum of conversation, the kind of morning soundtrack that says, something important is happening, but nobody's in a rush. You stretch, brush a stray blade of grass from your cheek, and wander toward the source of the noise. The scent of wood smoke and warm clay draws you in, and soon you find yourself at the heart of a Muisca Goldsmiths workshop, a place where mud fire and a little beeswax can turn river dust into treasure. The goldsmiths are already at work, sleeves rolled, brows furrowed in concentration. You watch as one of them kneads a lump of beeswax, shaping it with nimble fingers into something that looks suspiciously like a frog. Or maybe it's a bat, or possibly a shaman who's had a rough night. Art is subjective after all. The wax model is delicate, every detail pressed and pinched with care, because soon it will be gone forever. Mainstream historical fact: the Muisca were masters of the lost wax casting technique, a method that let them create intricate gold objects with astonishing precision. First, a model is sculpted in beeswax. Then, it's covered in fine clay, which is left to dry and harden. The piece is gently heated, melting the wax and leaving behind a hollow mold. Liquid gold, heated in simple but effective furnaces, is poured in. Once cooled, the clay is broken away, revealing a golden object that's one of a kind. No two are ever exactly alike. You lean in, mesmerized by the process. The goldsmith's apprentice fans the coals, sending a shower of sparks into the morning air. The gold, nestled in a crucible, glows red-hot, almost alive. You can feel the heat on your face, and you're suddenly very aware that ancient goldsmithing is not exactly OSH approved. One wrong move, and you'll be the first person in history to invent the golden eyebrow. Here's your quirky tidbit: Muisca goldsmiths sometimes used river pebbles as makeshift tongs, pinching hot molds with whatever they had on hand. If you've ever tried to grab a pizza stone without an oven mitt, you know the risk. Historians still argue whether these improvisations were a sign of genius resourcefulness or just a lack of proper kitchenware. Either way, you have to admire the commitment. The workshop is a symphony of sound. Clay cracking, metal hissing, the occasional muttered curse when a mold doesn't cooperate. You watch as a goldsmith gently taps the cooled mold with a wooden mallet, breaking away the clay to reveal a gleaming frog, its back arched as if ready to leap. The gold catches the light, and for a moment, it's as if the creature is alive, frozen in that perfect instant before movement. Historians still debate how much of the gold work was purely decorative and how much served a deeper purpose. Some pieces are clearly ritual objects, meant for offerings or ceremonies. Others seem designed for everyday use. Pendants, nose rings, even tiny bells that would jingle with every step. The line between sacred and practical is as thin as a gold wire, and nobody's quite sure where it's drawn. You wander through the workshop, marveling at the variety of objects taking shape. There are tiny animals, human figures, abstract designs that look like something you'd find in a modern art gallery. The goldsmiths work in teams, each person specializing in a different part of the process. One shapes the wax, another mixes the clay, a third handles the fire. It's a dance, each step timed to perfection, and you're just grateful nobody's asked you to join in. The last thing they need is a clumsy outsider dropping molten gold on their toes. A joke floats through your mind. If you ever feel like you're under pressure at work, just remember these goldsmiths. One slip, and you're not just out of a job. You're the proud owner of a very expensive, very useless lump of gold. You pause by a table where finished pieces are laid out, each one more beautiful than the last. Some are destined for the temples, others for the Zippa's court, and a few will be buried as offerings in the sacred lakes. Each object tells a story, a prayer, a promise, a memory cast in gold. Historians still argue about the origins of the lost wax technique. Did the Muisca invent it themselves, or did the idea travel along ancient trade routes, passed from hand to hand like a well-loved recipe? The answer is lost to time, like so many other secrets, but the results speak for themselves. As the day wears on, the workshop quiets. The Goldsmiths gather to share a meal, maize cakes, roasted tubers, and a little chicha, the local brew. You join them, savoring the simple food and the sense of camaraderie. The fire crackles, the gold cools, and for a moment, the world feels perfectly balanced. Mud, fire, beeswax, and a little bit of magic. You close your eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the soft murmur of voices lull you into a gentle doze. The goldsmith's gentle art has worked its spell, and you drift, dreaming of frogs, bats, and the endless possibilities hidden in a lump of beeswax. You wake to find yourself surrounded by a collection of tiny golden figures, each one perched on a reed mat like a miniature army waiting for orders. The goldsmiths have finished their work for the day, and now you're in the company of tunjos, small, mysterious offerings that seem to radiate both mischief and meaning. You reach out, your fingertip hovering over a golden frog, half expecting it to hop away when you blink. Tunjos are everywhere in Muisca life. They're not just trinkets or toys, they're offerings, tokens of gratitude, pleas for help, or sometimes just a way to say, sorry for stepping on your cornfield. The villagers place them in shrines, hide them in caves, and, on at least one legendary occasion, accidentally drop them into a cooking pot, much to the dismay of whoever got a mouthful of gold with their soup. You can't help but smile. History is full of grand gestures, but it's the little accidents that make it human. Mainstream historical fact tunjos are among the most iconic artifacts of the Muisca civilization. Made using the lost wax technique, these small gold or tembaga gold, copper alloy figures often depict humans, animals, or abstract forms. They were used as votive offerings, left at sacred sites, and sometimes buried with the dead to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. Archaeologists have found thousands of tunjos, each one a tiny window into the hopes and fears of a vanished world. You pick up a tunjo shaped like a bird, its wings outstretched as if caught mid-flight. The detail is astonishing, each feather etched with care, the eyes wide and watchful. You wonder what prayer it carried, what wish was whispered as it was placed in a shrine or dropped into a lake. Was it for rain? For love? Or maybe just for a good harvest and a little peace and quiet for once? Here's your quirky tidbit: some tunjos are so small and delicate that they've been mistaken for lost buttons or bits of jewelry. There's even a theory, half joking, half serious, that some tunjos were used as ancient get-well-soon charms tucked under pillows or slipped into baskets of food. Historians still argue whether these miniature masterpieces were meant for the gods or just for impressing the neighbors. You imagine a Muisca goldsmith grinning as he hands over a particularly fine tunjo, waiting to see if anyone notices the tiny mustache he's added for fun. You wander through the village, spotting tunjos tucked into every nook and cranny. There's one at the base of a tree, another balanced on a windowsill, and a third nestled in the fork of a branch, glinting in the afternoon sun. The villagers treat them with a mix of reverence and affection, as if each one is both a sacred object and an old friend. You watch as a child carefully places a tunjo beside a bowl of fruit, whispering a wish that only the gods, and maybe a passing squirrel, will ever hear. Historians still debate the true meaning of tunjos. Some see them as purely religious, tokens of devotion offered in hopes of divine favor. Others argue they were more personal, a way for individuals to mark milestones or seek comfort in uncertain times. The truth, as always, is probably a little bit of both. Faith and hope, fear and love, all wrapped up in a piece of gold no bigger than your thumb. You pause by a group of elders, listening as they swap stories about the most famous tunjos. There's the tale of the tunjo that brought rain after a long drought, the one that vanished from a shrine only to reappear miles away, and, of course, the legendary tunjo that was supposedly shaped like a potato and offered to the gods as an apology for a particularly disappointing harvest. You can't help but laugh. Apparently, even the gods have a sense of humor when it comes to root vegetables. A joke drifts through your mind. If you ever lose your keys, just tell everyone you were making an offering to the household spirits. Bonus points if you can blame it on a mischievous tunjo. As the sun sets, the villagers gather for a quiet ceremony. Each person holds a tunjo, their faces lit by the flickering glow of torches. One by one, they step forward, placing their offerings in a shallow pit lined with flowers and fragrant herbs. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and the soft murmur of prayers. You close your eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the gentle weight of the tunjo in your hand anchor you to this moment. A tiny piece of gold, a universe of meaning. Historians still argue about the fate of the tunjos. Some were buried and forgotten, others stolen or melted down, and a lucky few found their way to museums, where they sit behind glass, silently telling their stories to anyone who cares to listen. You drift, the ceremony fading into a blur of light and shadow, the tunjo's golden glow lingering in your dreams. You wake to the sound of drums, low and steady, pulsing through the dawn mist like a heartbeat. The village is stirring, but today is different. There's a hush in the air, a sense of anticipation that prickles your skin. You follow the crowd as they gather near the sacred lake, everyone moving with a quiet, purposeful energy. At the center of it all stands the Zipa, the Muisca chief, his face calm and unreadable, his body bare except for a simple loincloth and an elaborate necklace that glitters with gold. You watch as attendants approach, carrying bowls filled with fine gold dust. The Zipa steps forward, and with a slow, deliberate motion, they begin to cover his skin in shimmering powder. It clings to him, turning him into a living statue, a figure of myth and legend. The crowd murmurs in awe, and you can't help but think that if Instagram had existed, this would have gone viral in about 5 seconds. You try not to sneeze. Gold dust is probably not covered by your health insurance. Mainstream historical fact, the Muisca ritual of covering their chief in gold dust is the origin of the El Dorado legend. The Zipa would be rowed out to the center of the sacred lake, most famously Lake Guatavita, where he would make offerings of gold and precious objects to the gods, seeking their favor for the year ahead. This spectacle dazzled early Spanish chroniclers who spun it into tales of a lost city made entirely of gold. As the Zipa glides across the water in a reed canoe, the surface perfectly still, you feel the collective breath of the crowd held tight. At the center of the lake he stands and, with a flourish, scatters gold dust into the air. The particles catch the rising sun, turning the world to molten fire for a heartbeat. Then, with a practiced hand, he tips bowls of gold objects, tunja's jewelry, strange little frogs, into the water. Each splash is a prayer, a promise, a hope cast into the unknown. Here's your quirky tidbit: some versions of the ritual included tossing emeralds and even carved seashells into the lake, just in case the gods were feeling extra picky. There's even a rumor that one year, someone threw in a golden nose ring shaped like a llama, which historians still argue was either a heartfelt offering or an inside joke gone too far. You stand at the water's edge, watching as the gold sinks out of sight. The crowd is silent, the only sound the gentle lapping of waves and the distant call of a bird. You wonder what it feels like to be the Zipa, to bear the weight of so many hopes and dreams, all gilded and glittering. You also wonder if he's worried about getting gold dust in his eyes. Occupational hazards even for living legends. Historians still debate the exact meaning of the ritual. Was it a plea for rain, a celebration of harvest, or a way to honor ancestors? Some say it was all of these and more, a ritual so layered with symbolism that even the Muisca themselves might have disagreed about its true purpose. The only certainty is the awe it inspired, both then and now. You glance around, noticing the subtle choreography of the ceremony. Attendants move with practiced grace, collecting empty bowls, straightening feathers, and keeping an eye on the youngest children, who are clearly itching to dive in after the shiny treasures. You stifle a laugh. Some things never change, even when gold is involved. A joke pops into your mind. If you ever feel like your morning routine is too complicated, just remember the Zipa. All he had to do was get up, get gilded, row across a lake, and make offerings to the gods. No pressure. As the ceremony draws to a close, the crowd disperses, leaving the lake shimmering in the early light. The Zipa is led away, his golden sheen already fading as attendants brush him clean. You linger by the water, imagining the layers of offerings that must have built up over centuries. Gold, emeralds, maybe even that infamous llama nose ring. Each one a silent testament to faith and tradition. Historians still argue about how much gold actually ended up in the lake. Some say the Spanish exaggerated. seeing what they wanted to see in their fevered search for riches. Others point to the artifacts recovered from the lake's depths as proof that the legends were rooted in reality. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the murky water between myth and memory. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of the drums echo in your chest, the scent of incense and lake water filling your senses. The ritual lingers in the air, a golden afterimage that will haunt your dreams long after the last fleck of dust has settled. You trail after the last of the villagers as they drift away from the lake, the echo of drums still humming in your ears. The morning haze is lifting, and with it comes a new sound. Whispers, urgent and excited, rippling through the crowd like wind through tall grass. You catch snatches of conversation stories about the Zipa's dazzling gold, about the treasures hidden beneath the lake, about strangers with strange accents asking too many questions. You pause, realizing you're witnessing the birth of a legend, one that's about to set the world on fire. Mainstream historical fact: the story of the Golden Zipa and the lake offerings didn't stay a local secret for long. Spanish conquistadors, fresh from their triumphs in the Caribbean and Mexico, arrived in the Andes hungry for wealth. When they heard tales of a land where gold was tossed into lakes like loose change, their ears perked up, and their imaginations ran wild. Thus, the legend of El Dorado, the Gilded Man, was born. You picture the first Spanish scouts stumbling into a Muisca village, their armor clanking, faces sunburned and suspicious. They're greeted by curious stares and polite distance. After all, the Muisca have seen traders before, but never anyone quite this shiny or this desperate. The Spaniards try to ask about gold, but their questions are met with shrugs, sly smiles, or the occasional wild goose chase. You can't help but smirk. If you had a nickel for every time a local sent a conquistador off in the wrong direction, you'd probably have enough for your own tiny gold tunjo. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some early Spanish chroniclers claimed the Muisca used gold dust as body glitter for festivals and even sprinkled it on their food for extra flavor. Historians still argue whether this was a misunderstanding, an exaggeration, or just a case of conquistadors being jealous of the Muisca skincare routine. You imagine a Spanish officer, notebook in hand, jotting down, "Locals eat gold." Must investigate further, while a Muisca elder tries not to laugh. The legend spreads like wildfire. Every new arrival, soldier, priest, or fortune seeker adds a little more sparkle to the story. Soon, El Dorado isn't just a man, it's a city, a kingdom, a whole world made of gold. Maps are drawn, expeditions are launched, and the jungles of South America fill with the sound of boots, curses, and the occasional panicked scream when someone mistakes a capybara for a monster. Historians still debate who first told the Spanish about El Dorado. Was it a Muisca informant, hoping to distract the invaders? Was it a rival tribe eager to send their enemies on a wild goose chase? Or did the Spanish simply hear what they wanted to hear, their dreams of gold drowning out any inconvenient details? The answer, as always, is as slippery as a nugget of gold in a muddy river. You wander through the village, watching as the Muisca go about their day, seemingly unfazed by the growing storm on the horizon. Children play by the lake, goldsmiths hammer away in their workshops, and elders swap stories by the fire. But you notice subtle changes. Guards posted at the village entrance, valuables hidden away, a wary glance whenever a stranger passes by. The world is shifting, and everyone can feel it. A joke drifts through your mind. If you ever think your gossip has gotten out of hand, just remember the Muisca. One story about a gold-covered chief, and suddenly half of Europe is knocking on your door. You pause by a group of Spanish soldiers, their armor battered and their boots caked with mud. They're arguing over a map, each one convinced that El Dorado lies just over the next hill, or maybe the one after that. You watch as they set off, determination in their eyes and blisters already forming on their feet. You almost feel sorry for them, almost. Historians still argue about the impact of the El Dorado legend. Some say it drove the Spanish to madness, fueling endless expeditions and untold suffering. Others believe it was just one more story in a world already overflowing with myth and ambition. The truth, as always, is a little bit of both. A dream that inspired greatness and greed in equal measure. As the sun sets, you find yourself back at the lake, the water calm and golden in the fading light. The legend of El Dorado is just beginning, its echoes spreading out across continents and centuries. You close your eyes, listening to the distant sound of drums, and wonder what new stories tomorrow will bring. You wake to a sky heavy with clouds, the air thick with the promise of rain. The village is quieter today, the usual bustle replaced by a sense of waiting. You wander toward the edge of Lake Guatavita, drawn by a strange mix of curiosity and caution. The lake is a perfect circle, its waters dark and still, as if holding its breath. You stand at the shore, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down, and realize you're not the first to be tempted by its secrets. Mainstream historical fact: Lake Guatavita is one of the most famous sacred sites in Colombia. For centuries, it was the center of Muisca ritual and the heart of the El Dorado legend. Spanish conquistadors, obsessed with the idea of limitless gold, made repeated attempts to drain or dredge the lake, convinced that untold riches lay hidden beneath its surface. You watch as a group of treasure hunters, part Spanish, part local, part just plain desperate, set up camp along the shore. They're armed with ropes, buckets, and a plan that's equal parts ambition and wishful thinking. The goal: lower the water level and scoop up whatever the Muisca left behind. You stifle a laugh. If you've ever tried to bail out a bathtub with a teacup, you know how this is going to end. Here's your quirky tidbit: in 1580, the Spanish actually tried to cut a notch in the crater wall to drain Lake Guatavita. The result: the water dropped a few feet, revealing some gold and a lot of very confused fish. Unfortunately, the banks collapsed, the lake refilled, and the treasure hunters were left with soggy boots and a story that would only get taller with each retelling. Historians still argue whether the gold recovered was just a fraction of what was lost, or if most of the offerings had already been claimed by mud, time, and the occasional opportunistic duck. You walk the perimeter, noticing the scars left by centuries of digging and dreaming. The ground is uneven, pocked with old trenches and half-collapsed tunnels. You spot a rusted helmet, a broken shovel, and, if you squint, what might be a gold tunjo glinting in the mud, or maybe just a bottle cap. You decide not to risk muddy pants for the sake of a souvenir. The locals watch the treasure hunters with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Some offer advice. "Try over there. That's where my uncle found a frog-shaped pendant," while others shake their heads, muttering about fools and their gold fever. You can't help but sympathize. After all, Lake Guatavita has been making promises it never quite keeps for centuries. Historians still debate how much gold was actually offered to the lake. Some say the stories are wildly exaggerated, a case of wishful thinking and creative accounting. Others point to the artifacts recovered: tunjos, jewelry, even a golden raft depicting the Zipa's ritual, as proof that the legends were built on a foundation of glittering truth. The real treasure, it seems, is the endless argument. You pause by a group of Spanish soldiers, their uniforms stained and their tempers frayed. They're arguing over who gets the next turn at the bucket brigade, each convinced that the next scoop will be the one that changes everything. You watch as one soldier, tired and muddy, sits down hard on a rock, only to jump up, yelping, as he realizes he's landed on a sharp piece of gold. The others laugh, and for a moment, the tension breaks, replaced by the simple joy of a lucky find. A joke drifts through your mind. If you ever feel like your weekend project is getting out of hand, just remember the Spanish tried to drain an entire lake for a handful of gold. Next time your DIY shelves collapse, at least you're not responsible for a minor ecological disaster. As the rain finally begins to fall, the treasure hunters retreat to their tents, their dreams of riches postponed for another day. The lake remains, serene and inscrutable, its secrets safe for now. You stand at the water's edge, the cool drops soaking your skin, and wonder how many more will come, drawn by the promise of gold and the lure of a story that refuses to die. Historians still argue whether Lake Guatavita's greatest treasure is the gold hidden in its depths or the legends that swirl around its shores. You suspect it's a little of both. A reminder that sometimes the real riches are the stories we tell, the mysteries we chase, and the laughter that echoes long after the gold is gone. You turn away, the rain washing the mud from your feet, and head back toward the village, already dreaming of what wonders the next day will bring. You find yourself back among the Goldsmiths, drawn by the rhythmic tap, tap, tap of hammers against metal, and the faint, sweet scent of beeswax warming in the sun. The rain has passed, leaving the air fresh and the ground soft beneath your feet. You wander through the open-air workshop, where artisans are already deep into their day's work, coaxing beauty from the rawest of materials. The lost wax technique is on full display here. You watch as a goldsmith rolls a lump of beeswax between his palms, shaping it into a delicate spiral. Another artisan carves tiny patterns into a wax frog, her hands steady and sure despite the early hour. Each piece is a miniature act of devotion, a promise that what begins in wax and clay will end in gold. Mainstream historical fact, the Muisca were renowned for their mastery of the lost wax casting process, a method that allowed them to produce intricate gold objects with astonishing detail. This technique, known as cire perdue in French, was practiced by various ancient cultures, but the Muisca made it their own, producing everything from jewelry to ceremonial figures with a precision that still dazzles modern eyes. You lean in, watching as the artisans coat the wax models in fine clay, layering it carefully to capture every detail. The molds are left to dry in the sun, then gently heated over a charcoal fire. The wax melts and runs out, leaving a hollow shell, fragile, perfect, and ready for gold. The goldsmiths pour molten metal into the molds, their movements practiced and calm, as if they're pouring tea rather than liquid treasure. Here's your quirky tidbit: sometimes the goldsmiths would add a pinch of salt to the molten gold, believing it would make the metal shine brighter. Historians still argue whether this was a stroke of genius chemistry or just wishful thinking. Either way, it's a reminder that every artist has their secret ingredient, even if it's just a dash of superstition. You notice the camaraderie among the goldsmiths. They tease each other about lopsided frogs and stubborn molds, sharing jokes and stories as they work. One apprentice, frustrated by a mold that keeps cracking, mutters something under his breath that makes the others laugh. Apparently, even in ancient times, technical difficulties were a universal language. Historians still debate how the Muisca learned the lost wax technique. Was it an independent invention, a spark of genius in the high Andes? Or did the knowledge travel along trade routes, passed from one culture to another like a well-guarded secret? The answer is lost to time, but the results are undeniable. Objects so beautiful and strange that they seem to belong to another world. You wander from table to table, marveling at the variety of designs. There are frogs with bulging eyes, bats with outstretched wings, and human figures caught mid-dance. Some pieces are so tiny you have to squint to see the details, others are large enough to fit in your palm, heavy with meaning and memory. The goldsmiths work with a quiet joy, their hands moving with the confidence of those who know they're part of something bigger than themselves. A joke floats through your mind. If you ever feel like your job is repetitive, just remember these goldsmiths. One wrong move and your masterpiece turns into a very expensive blob. At least your mistakes don't end up in a museum. You pause by a finished piece, still warm from the fire. It's a tunjo shaped like a jaguar, its body twisted in a pose that's both fierce and playful. The gold catches the light, and for a moment you swear it moves. You wonder what stories the goldsmiths tell themselves as they work. Tales of gods and heroes, of lost loves and found fortunes, of the endless dance between creation and destruction. Historians still argue about the purpose of some of these objects. Were they meant for ritual, for trade, or simply for the joy of making something beautiful? The truth, as always, is probably a little bit of everything. A reminder that art and life are rarely as simple as they seem. As the sun climbs higher, the goldsmiths gather for a break, sharing maize cakes and chicha, their laughter ringing out across the workshop. You sit with them, savoring the warmth of the fire and the sense of community. The lost wax technique, you realize, is more than just a method. It's a tradition, a way of connecting past and present earth and sky, dream and reality. You close your eyes, letting the sounds and scents of the workshop lull you into a gentle doze, the promise of gold and the magic of creation lingering in your thoughts. You stretch, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and find yourself surrounded by a menagerie of gold. The workshop has transformed overnight into a gallery of strange and wonderful creatures. Frogs with bulging eyes, bats with outstretched wings, and shamans frozen mid-chant. Each piece glows with its own secret, the gold catching the morning light and throwing it in every direction. You wander slowly, half awake, half dreaming, as if you've stumbled into a bedtime story told by a very creative magpie. Mainstream historical fact: Muisca goldwork is famous not just for its technical brilliance, but for its wild variety of forms. The artisans crafted everything from animals, frogs, birds, bats, to stylized human figures, some with elaborate headdresses and others with mysterious, almost alien features. Many of these shapes had deep symbolic meaning, representing fertility, transformation, or the connection between the human and the divine. You pause by a golden frog, its legs tucked under its body, ready to leap. Frogs were sacred to the Muisca, symbols of rain and fertility. After all, nothing says, "Good harvest," like a chorus of amphibians serenading the night. Next to it sits a bat, wings spread wide, fangs bared in a grin that's equal parts mischievous and menacing. Bats, too, had their place in Muisca cosmology, representing the night, the underworld, and the mysterious journeys between worlds. You imagine a goldsmith hunched over his work, trying to decide if his bat should look wise, scary, or just a little bit silly. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Muisca gold objects are so abstract that modern archaeologists have jokingly called them ancient Rorschach tests. Is that a shaman in trance, a bird in flight, or just a goldsmith's bad day? Historians still argue about the meaning of certain designs, with some insisting they're ritual objects and others claiming they're just really fancy conversation starters. You can almost hear the debates echoing through the centuries. No, Javier, that's definitely a frog. Or maybe a potato. You move on to a group of human figures, each one unique. Some wear elaborate masks, their faces hidden behind stylized gold, while others are adorned with nose rings, earrings, and necklaces that would make any modern influencer jealous. One figure holds a staff topped with a tiny bird, another raises its arms as if calling down the rain. The details are astonishing: tiny fingers, swirling patterns, even the suggestion of tattoos or body paint. You wonder if these were portraits of real people or idealized images of priests, warriors, or ancestors. Historians still debate the function of these figures. Were they offerings, meant to carry prayers to the gods? Were they badges of office, worn by chiefs and shamans during ceremonies? Or were they simply expressions of artistic joy, the goldsmiths letting their imaginations run wild? The truth, as always, is a shimmering blur somewhere between sacred and playful. A joke bubbles up then, if you ever feel like your art isn't appreciated. Just remember, 500 years from now someone might be arguing whether your doodle is a masterpiece or a grocery list. You linger by a particularly strange piece. A figure with outstretched arms, its head topped with what looks like a bird, a bat, and a frog all at once. It's as if the goldsmith couldn't decide and just went for the combo platter. You imagine the conversation. What does it mean? Yes, sometimes ambiguity is the point. You notice that some of the objects are worn smooth, the details faded by centuries of handling. Others are sharp and crisp, as if they were finished only yesterday. You wonder about their journeys. Buried in lakes, hidden in caves, passed from hand to hand, each one gathering stories like gold dust in the folds of a riverbank. Historians still argue about the origins of certain motifs. Did the Muisca invent these forms themselves, or were they inspired by distant cultures, carried along ancient trade routes like whispers on the wind? The evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive. A frog here, a bat there, a shaman everywhere, each one a clue and a question. You sit for a moment, letting the golden creatures keep you company. The workshop is quiet now, the only sound the soft clink of metal as a goldsmith adds the finishing touch to a new piece. You close your eyes, imagining the world these objects once inhabited, a world of ritual and celebration, of mystery and laughter, where every frog and bat had a story to tell. You drift, surrounded by gold and dreams, the line between animal, human, and spirit blurring with every breath. You rise from your golden menagerie, stretching your legs and brushing imaginary gold dust from your clothes. The village is alive with movement. Traders arriving from distant valleys, their llamas laden with colorful bundles, children darting between stalls, eyes wide at the promise of sweets and stories. The air is thick with the scent of roasting maize, the tang of fresh fruit, and the unmistakable glint of gold catching the sun at every turn. You follow the flow of gold through the market, watching as it changes hands in 100 different ways. A trader from the lowlands offers a basket of cacao beans in exchange for a delicate gold pendant. A visiting chief presents a gleaming nose ring as tribute to the Zippa, hoping for an alliance, or at least a good seat at the next festival. Gold is everywhere, not just as treasure but as currency, as gift, as symbol. It moves through the world like a rumor, growing brighter and more elaborate with every telling. Mainstream historical fact. The Muisca were part of a vast trade network that crisscrossed the Andes, connecting them to peoples as far away as the Caribbean coast and the Amazon basin. Gold traveled these routes alongside salt, emeralds, feathers, and foodstuffs, each item carrying its own value and story. Muisca goldwork was especially prized, sought after for its beauty and the mystery of its origins. You pause at a stall where a goldsmith is showing off his latest creation. A nose ornament so large and ornate that you wonder how anyone could wear it without toppling over. The crowd laughs as a young man tries it on, wobbling dramatically before striking a pose worthy of a runway. You can't help but smile. Some things never change, whether it's fashion or the desire to make your friends laugh. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Muisca gold objects were designed to be worn in the nose, ears, or even as elaborate mouthpieces. There are accounts of chiefs and priests so bedecked in gold that, according to legend, their faces glittered in the sun like disco balls. Historians still argue whether these accessories were comfortable, ceremonial, or just a really effective way to keep people at a respectful distance. You watch as a group of traders haggles over a set of gold beads, their voices rising and falling in a melody of negotiation. One trader insists that his beads are made from the purest gold in the land, while another claims his have been blessed by the spirits of the river. You suspect both stories are equally true, or equally made up. The gold itself doesn't care. It moves from hand to hand, gathering stories and fingerprints, never staying in one place for long. Historians still debate the role of gold in Muisca society. Was it primarily a medium of exchange, a store of wealth, or a sacred material reserved for ritual and tribute? The evidence points in all directions at once. Gold is currency, gold is offering, gold is status symbol. The truth, as always, is a little bit of everything, shimmering just out of reach. You follow the gold as it leaves the market, carried by traders heading to distant villages, by messengers delivering tribute to the Zipa, by artisans tucking away a few precious flakes for their next masterpiece. Some of it will be melted down and recast, transformed into new shapes and new stories. Some will be buried in the earth, hidden away for future generations, or future treasure hunters to discover. A joke drifts through your mind. If you ever feel like your paycheck disappears too quickly, just remember the Muisca. Sometimes your gold ends up as someone else's nose ring before you've even finished your lunch. You pause by the temple, watching as priests accept offerings of gold and salt, their hands steady and practiced. The gold is placed on altars, its gleam softened by candlelight and incense smoke. You wonder how many prayers are whispered over each piece, how many hopes and fears are tangled in the shine. Historians still argue about the fate of all this gold. Some say it was hoarded by the elite, locked away in hidden chambers. Others insist it was constantly on the move, circulating through markets, ceremonies, and rituals. The truth, as always, is a story in motion. Gold that never stops traveling, never stops changing, never stops shining. As the sun sets, you watch the last traders pack up their goods, the market slowly emptying until only the echoes of laughter and the glint of gold remain. You close your eyes, letting the day's stories swirl around you, the promise of more adventures waiting just beyond the horizon. You wake to the sound of distant shouting and the clatter of hooves on stone. The air is different, charged, restless, as if the mountains themselves are holding their breath. You slip through the village, past shuttered windows and wary faces, to the edge of the main road. There, winding their way up the slope, are the newcomers' Spanish conquistadors, armor gleaming, banners snapping in the wind, and expressions that say they're here for business. And that business is gold. Mainstream historical fact, the Spanish arrived in the Muisca highlands in the 1530s, led by Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada. Drawn by tales of El Dorado, they trekked through jungle, swamp, and mountain, enduring hunger, disease, and the kind of navigation that would make even your phone's GPS throw up its hands in despair. Their arrival marked the beginning of a new era, one defined by chaos, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of gold. You watch as the conquistadors stumble into the plaza, their boots caked with mud, their faces drawn and sunburned. They look around, eyes wide at the sight of gold ornaments glinting in the sunlight, and you can almost hear their thoughts. We've found it. The city of gold. The villagers, for their part, stand back, their expressions a mix of curiosity, fear, and something like resignation. After all, they've heard the stories too. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Spanish chroniclers complained endlessly about the local food, especially the chicha, Muisca corn beer, which they described as sour, strange, and probably brewed by witches. Historians still argue whether this was genuine culinary confusion or just an excuse to grumble about everything that wasn't gold or pork. You imagine a conquistador, faced with a steaming bowl of maize stew, sighing theatrically and asking if it comes with a side of treasure. The Spanish waste no time. They demand gold, and when it's not handed over fast enough, they start searching, questioning, and, let's be honest, making a mess of things. They poke around temples, dig up offerings, and interrogate anyone who looks like they might know where the next big score is hidden. You watch as one unlucky soldier, convinced he's found a secret stash, ends up waist deep in a pit of mud and old tunjos. The villagers try not to laugh, but you can see the smirks. Historians still debate the impact of the Spanish arrival. Some say it was an apocalypse, a sudden and violent end to the Muisca way of life. Others argue that the changes were more gradual, a slow unraveling as old traditions collided with new ambitions. The truth, as always, is tangled, a story of loss and survival, of adaptation and resistance, of gold that slips through everyone's fingers. You wander through the chaos, dodging soldiers and traders, priests and scribes. The Spanish are everywhere, their gold fever matched only by their confusion. They argue over maps, over rumors, over whether the next lake or mountain might finally hold the fabled city of gold. You overhear one conquistador grumbling about the local climate, his boots squelching with every step. "If I wanted mud and disappointment, I'd have stayed in Spain," he mutters, earning a sympathetic nod from his equally muddy horse. A joke bubbles up. If you ever think your travel plans have gone awry, just remember the Spanish conquistadors, no GPS, no snacks, and the only souvenirs are blisters and mosquito bites. You pause by a group of Muisca elders, their faces calm and unreadable. They speak softly, their words lost in the noise, but their eyes are sharp. They've seen empires rise and fall, and they know that gold is never just gold. It's a promise, a curse, a story that's never quite finished. Historians still argue about how much gold the Spanish actually found. Some say it was enough to fill ships and fuel empires. Others insist it was a disappointment, a trickle rather than a flood, the real riches lost to time, mud, and legend. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. A handful of treasures, a mountain of dreams, and a legacy that lingers long after the gold is gone. As night falls, the village settles into uneasy silence. The Spanish campfires flicker on the hills, their laughter and curses drifting on the wind. You close your eyes, the scent of wood smoke and gold dust in the air, and wonder what tomorrow will bring. The dawn is quiet, almost apologetic, as if the world itself is trying to make up for the chaos of the night before. You wander through the village, past empty stalls and abandoned tools, the goldsmiths' workshops eerily silent. The Spanish are still here, but the feverish energy has faded, replaced by a kind of grim determination. You watch as they gather up every scrap of gold they can find, tunjaws, jewelry, even the tiniest bid, and feed it into makeshift furnaces, the flames licking hungrily at centuries of artistry. Mainstream historical fact, the Spanish, desperate to ship as much wealth as possible back to Europe, melted down nearly all the gold they found. Intricate Muisca artifacts, each one unique, each one a piece of living history, were reduced to anonymous ingots, their stories lost in the fire. Only a handful survived, hidden by villagers or overlooked in the rush, to be rediscovered centuries later. You stand by the furnace, the heat prickling your skin, and watch as a golden frog disappears into the flames. The goldsmiths look on, their faces carefully blank. You wonder what they're thinking. Anger, grief, or maybe just exhaustion. It's hard to watch something so beautiful vanish, harder still to know it will never come back. You try to imagine a world where every family heirloom, every childhood drawing, is tossed into a fire for the sake of a little extra weight on a ship. Here's your quirky tidbit: some Spanish soldiers, superstitious to the core, refused to wear jewelry made from melted Muisca gold, convinced it was cursed. According to legend, one unlucky officer who ignored the warnings ended up with a necklace that turned green and gave him a rash. Historians still argue whether this was a case of bad metallurgy or just really effective Muisca revenge. You wander through the ashes, the air thick with the scent of smoke and loss. The villagers move quietly, gathering what they can, hiding what little gold remains in clever places. inside hollowed-out gourds, beneath floorboards, or even sewn into the hems of cloaks. You spot a child clutching a single gold bead, her fingers tight around it, as if she's holding onto a piece of the sun. Historians still debate the fate of the melted gold. Some say it was shipped to Spain, fueling wars, palaces, and the endless ambitions of kings. Others believe much of it was lost to shipwrecks, storms, and pirates, scattered across the ocean floor like breadcrumbs for future treasure hunters. The truth, as always, is a patchwork. Some gold made it to Europe, some was lost, and some remains hidden in the hills and lakes of Colombia, waiting for a new story to begin. You pause by the lake, now quiet and still, its surface reflecting the morning sky. The offerings are gone, but the memory lingers. A shimmer in the water, a whisper in the reeds. You wonder how many stories were lost with the gold, how many prayers and promises melted down and forgotten. But as you listen, you realize the stories aren't gone. They've just changed shape, slipping into legend, waiting to be told again. A joke drifts through your mind. If you ever feel like your hard work is going unnoticed, just remember the Muisca Goldsmiths. 500 years later, people are still arguing about their frogs. You sit by the shore watching as the village slowly comes back to life. The gold is gone, but the people remain, resilient, resourceful, and quietly defiant. They plant new crops, repair their homes, and teach their children the old songs, the ones that remember what the gold once meant. Historians still argue about the legacy of the Muisca. Some say it ended with the Spanish conquest, a culture erased by fire and greed. Others insist it survives in language, in ritual, in the stubborn persistence of memory. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between, a story that refuses to end, no matter how many times it's melted down. As the sun climbs higher, you close your eyes, letting the warmth wash over you. The gold is gone, but the stories remain, shining just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to listen. You wander through the centuries, the world shifting around you as the memory of goldsmiths and lost lakes gives way to the hum of modern Bogota. The city is alive, cars honking, street vendors calling out, skyscrapers gleaming in the sun. Yet, beneath the concrete and glass, the old stories still shimmer, waiting for anyone curious enough to look. You find yourself drawn to the Museo del Oro, the Gold Museum, its doors opening with a whisper of cool air and anticipation. Inside, the lights are soft, the floors polished to a gentle shine. Glass cases line the halls, each one a time capsule filled with treasures rescued from oblivion: tunjos, necklaces, nose rings, and golden frogs, all gleaming under the careful gaze of museum guards and sleepy schoolchildren on field trips. Mainstream historical fact: the Museo del Oro in Bogota houses the world's largest collection of pre-Hispanic goldwork, much of it crafted by the Muisca and their neighbors. These objects, once offerings to gods or symbols of power, now sit behind glass, admired by millions every year. The museum is a testament to the artistry and resilience of cultures nearly erased by conquest. You pause in front of a case holding the famous golden raft, a tiny masterpiece, no bigger than your hand, depicting the Zippa and his attendants on a reed canoe, ready to make their legendary offering. The details are astonishing: delicate figures, tiny bowls, ripples in the water, all cast in gold. You imagine the hands that shaped it, the prayers whispered over it, the centuries it spent hidden in the earth before being brought into the light. Here's your quirky tidbit. The museum's climate control is so precise that some visitors joke the gold is better preserved than their own skin. Historians still argue about the best way to display these treasures. Should they be shown as art, as history, or as sacred relics? You suspect the answer is yes to all three. You wander from case to case, marveling at the variety. There are earrings shaped like birds, masks with wide, enigmatic eyes, and tunjos so tiny you need a magnifying glass to see the details. Schoolchildren press their noses to the glass, their teachers spinning stories that blend fact and legend. You overhear one child ask, "Did the gold really come from a lake?" And the guide grins, launching into the tale of El Dorado, complete with dramatic hand gestures and a warning not to try swimming in any sacred lakes, unless you want to meet a very cranky spirit. Historians still debate the meaning of many of these objects. Some see them as evidence of lost rituals, others as proof of ancient trade networks, and a few as nothing more than really fancy jewelry. The museum curators do their best to keep the arguments civil, but you can sense the passion in every display. Each piece a puzzle, each label a carefully worded guess. A joke floats through your mind. If you ever feel like your house is cluttered, just remember the museum. At least your collection of random objects doesn't require a security guard and a humidity sensor. You pause in a quiet corner, where a single tunjo sits on a velvet cushion, its gold surface worn smooth by centuries of handling. You wonder about the journey that brought it here, from a goldsmith's hands to a sacred lake, to a conquistador's pocket, to a museum in the heart of a bustling city. You imagine the stories it could tell, if only you could listen closely enough. Historians still argue about the legacy of the Muisca goldsmiths. Were they artists, priests, engineers, or all of the above? The truth, as always, is a little bit of everything. A golden thread woven through the fabric of history, connecting past and present, myth and reality. As you leave the museum, blinking in the bright sunlight, you realize that the gold of the Muisca is no longer just a legend or a lost treasure. It's a living memory, shining in the heart of the city, waiting for the next dreamer to come along and ask, "What if?" You step back into the city's bustle, the echoes of golden frogs and ancient rituals still humming in your mind. Bogo stretches around you, a patchwork of old and new, where the ghosts of the Muisca walk quietly beneath the rush of buses and the chatter of street vendors. The story of El Dorado lingers in the air, not as a feverish dream of conquest, but as a gentle shimmer, an idea that refuses to fade. You stroll through a plaza where artists sell jewelry inspired by Muisca designs. Spirals, frogs, and tiny canoes cast in brass and silver. Children dart between the stalls, their laughter ringing like little bells. You pause at a table where a young woman is hammering a pendant into shape. She glances up and grins, inviting you to try. You take the hammer, feeling the weight of centuries in your palm, and give the metal a gentle tap. It rings out a soft, bright note that seems to say, "We're still here." A mainstream historical fact, the legend of El Dorado inspired centuries of exploration, art, and storytelling. Even after the Spanish failed to find their golden city, the myth lived on, fueling expeditions, novels, movies, and even the names of cities and airlines. Today, El Dorado is less a place and more a symbol, the dream of something wondrous just out of reach, the hope that there's still magic left in the world. You wander into a quiet park where a bronze statue of a Muisca goldsmith sits beneath a tree, his hands forever shaping an invisible frog. Nearby, a plaque tells the story, how the gentle art of the Muisca goldsmiths inspired legends, how their work survived fire and conquest, how their dreams outlasted empires. You sit beside him, feeling the cool metal under your hand, and imagine the goldsmiths of old, patient, clever, quietly proud of their craft. Here's your quirky tidbit: every year, Bogota hosts a festival celebrating its golden heritage, complete with parades, music, and the world's most competitive frog jumping contest. Historians still argue whether the real Muisca frogs could jump farther, or if modern frogs just have stage fright. You make a mental note to come back for the festivities, if only for the chance to see a frog in a tiny crown. You watch as the sun sets behind the mountains, the city glowing gold for a few brief moments. The legend of El Dorado is everywhere. In the jewelry shops, in the museum halls, in the whispered stories shared by grandparents at bedtime. It's in the dreams of artists and the laughter of children, in the gentle pride of a people who remember what it means to shape beauty from mud, fire, and beeswax. Historians still debate the boundaries between myth and history, between what was lost and what endures. But as you walk through the city, you realize that the line doesn't really matter. The gentle art of the Muisca goldsmiths lives on, not just in museums or festivals, but in every story told, every dream dreamed, every hope that glimmers just out of reach. You close your eyes, letting the city's hum fade into the soft hush of memory. The echoes of El Dorado linger, a golden thread winding through time, weaving together the past and the present, the real and the imagined. You breathe in, slow and deep, and feel the gentle glow of gold settling over you, as soft as a lullaby. Now, as night settles over Bogota and the last light slips behind the mountains, you let yourself drift. The world grows quieter, the city's heartbeat slowing to a gentle hush. You picture the Muisca goldsmiths at their fires, hands moving with patient grace, shaping frogs and bats and tiny canoes from the dust of rivers and the warmth of dreams. Their laughter is soft, their stories winding through the dark like a lullaby. You feel the cool air on your skin, the memory of gold shimmering just beneath your eyelids. The legends of El Dorado, once so loud and wild, now settle into a gentle whisper. Promises of wonder, of beauty, of hope that never fades. The gold is no longer something to chase or conquer. It's a quiet glow, a memory shared, a story retold in the hush of night. Let your breath slow, your thoughts soften. Imagine the lake, still and deep, holding its secrets close. Imagine the gold dust swirling down, settling gently on the bottom, each fleck a wish, a prayer, a dream. The world is safe here, wrapped in the gentle art of the Goldsmiths, in the warmth of old stories and the promise of new ones. You are part of this story now, drifting on the edge of sleep, carried by the echoes of laughter and the shimmer of gold. Let the city fade, let the legends rest. You are safe, you are warm, you are golden. Good night, dreamer. May your sleep be deep, your dreams gentle, and your heart forever touched by the quiet glow of El Dorado.